Hidden in the depths of the mind is a secret tomb where knowledge, fear, mystery, and a macabre sense of enjoyment is held. Each corner is resplendent with its own curiosities, and each curiosity appeals to a different soul. You're listening to the Crypt of the Unknown, a podcast that discusses the realms of the horrific and the fantastic in print, games, or on the screen. And now, introducing you to the Guardians of the Crypt, your tour guides. Here are Webb and Stefan J.D. Welcome, weary travelers, to the Crypt of the Unknown, a podcast that discusses the horrific and the fantastic in all forms of media. I am Webb, the critical android, and joining me for this episode, my friend, we have more than enough headroom for him, Stefan J.D.
Yes. Don't you forget about me.
How could we?
Right? We're just simple minds here, sorry.
Simple Minds, alive and kicking.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, that was one of their albums for those people who don't know.
Fuck are they talking about?
Did you know that Billy Idol was originally supposed to record that song? Don't you
Really?
forget about me? Yeah.
Oh my god, I never knew that.
Yeah, and there's a version he finally did hit and released his version on one of his greatest hits albums. It ain't bad.
Wow. Alright, I'm gonna have to listen to that.
It is interesting. Well, it's a completely different subject for a different time. It's better than some of the stuff on Cyberpunk, I'll put it that way.
Hey. Ooh, you leave that alone. Just kidding. No, that's it's an album that's fair for anyone to shit or love on.
Yes.
I'm okay with that.
If people have been keeping up with our weekly episodes here. But we're going to go with something completely different. So now for something completely different. We did do this, didn't we, with this one we have coming up?
Yes, we did.
We're doing something that's a real-life, kind of a creepy incident. Weird. Some of you may have heard of it before, others of you may have not, but it's time to take a kind of a nuanced look at something, Stefan, you have not seen before until I brought it to your attention, correct?
Yes, this is correct. In fact, my only history with Max Headroom is actually just seeing him in like some 80s commercial or something on YouTube, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but it looks cool.
Yeah, we are talking about not specifically Max Headroom, the character, but we are talking about Max Headroom, the broadcast signal intrusion, otherwise known as the Max Headroom signal hijacking, the Max Headroom Incident, however you want to put it. But it's a real-life instance of broadcast signal hijacking, or what they call a broadcast signal intrusion. That's kind of a self-explanatory thing. Something that's happened numerous times throughout history. Essentially, it's what it is. You're watching something, or there's something that's on the air. It's not one of those like philosophical statements of, if there was a signal intrusion but nobody watched it, did they really intrude? It's not like that kind of a thought experiment. It's where somebody is able to hijack the airwaves of either a radio station, television network, you name it, and they're able to override their signal with a competing signal that replaces whatever's being broadcast with whatever the hijacker is broadcasting. Have you ever seen any other incidences of this before or heard of any?
No. Sadly, the only other time that this has happened to me where something was happening weird with the TV and then it eventually happened with the whole neighborhood, it was like creating this weird fuzzy wave and like the characters were making a weird sound and then it just went blacked out and then the power went out following it and we didn't know what it was. And then it turns out, like, I want to say 500 feet from our house, one of my friend's older brothers had been hit by a car and hit the main power line of the neighborhood. So that's the closest I've ever came to anything of, like, a station being interrupted by anything. Other than that, no.
Yeah, and that's something that's specifically different because that's a hardware failure, where something is causing the signal to be disturbed by a fluctuation in power or an external force that's actually physically causing that problem with the signal getting to you. But in this case, it's actually a signal intrusion is replacing the signal or putting something else in there that is now overriding what would normally be on the airwaves. Another famous example of this happened, what they called the Captain Midnight incident, where a man named going by the name Captain Midnight, his birth name was not Captain Midnight. That may seem self-explanatory, but in case you were not aware, That's what happened. And this happened back in 1986 on HBO. As you may know, HBO, even back when it was in the 80s, was a pay network where you had to pay a monthly subscription to subscribe to HBO and get programming. Somehow, the airways for HBO had been overridden to show a test pattern with the phrase, "Good evening, HBO from Captain Midnight. $12.95 per month? No way. Showtime Movie Channel, beware." And this was done very late at night, I guess according to sources, at 12:32 a.m., during an airing of the movie The Falcon and the Snowman, and this was done on April 27th, 1986. It was about a 5-minute intrusion, and it come to find out that the person responsible for it was a man named John R. McDougal from Florida. He was upset about the fact that HBO was charging these amounts when he was very familiar with satellites. He was a satellite provider, or I guess his job was as a control operator for a satellite section in Florida. He was not very keen on the fact that this was going on, so he was able to override their signals from HBO and beam this message out, which is a federal crime because the FCC regulates the airwaves, and there's a reason why they're regulated. There's only so many different things that can go on over the air in certain areas depending on what you're broadcasting. Back in the day, this was the FCC was meant to regulate radio communications because you could have ships out at sea that were trying to transmit, and then you'd have radios and all this stuff without any kind of government oversight. People were stepping all over things. You had people broadcasting at the same frequencies, messing everything up. So it was a terrible situation back when the FCC was first created. That regulation is very strict. It's also why... Did you ever see that Malcolm in the Middle episode where Bryan Cranston's character was trying to relive his pirate radio days?
I've only seen one episode of Malcolm in the Middle, and it's the one where he is getting super into speed walking.
I know that episode.
That is the only one I've seen. I'm sorry, people.
No, but there's an episode where he's trying to relive his pirate radio days, and pirate radio was where, somebody would just build a transmitter, and they would just take over local airwaves, in a very succinct area. And even that is, a violation of the FCC, especially when those airways can be co-opted by the government, or either the local government or, the surrounding area, for things like emergency broadcast messaging. Obviously, we've all seen that before, where we'll get a warning for a storm warning or a test of the emergency broadcast system. You obviously know what I'm talking about.
Of course.
Yeah. Let's say the government is trying to do that and somebody is hijacking the signal because they're messing with things. That can prevent information from getting out to people if it happens to be the case. Broadcast signal intrusion is illegal, but I also think psychologically it can be a little scary. Let me put this forward to you because I don't know if this is the same, if you feel the same way. When I was a kid, I was always scared of those emergency messages that would come on the TV. There was always something unnerving about them.
I remember hearing one specifically one night, and we had one of those storms where it literally was so bad. It was like a monsoon storm where it literally blew the roof off of the school that I went to. And if you looked at my school, it's this steel, it's like the Fortress of Solitude. It's just made of everything strong, and you're just wow, how did we live through that? It might as well have been a tornado. And when the emergency broadcast came on for that, and it said do not go outside, and I knew I had to go outside for a reason, I was just terrified. And that might be the only recollection I have of that. But yeah, I was definitely it was that thunder that bellows for I don't know, 10 seconds, too long. You know what I mean? It just goes on and on. You're like, shut up. There's no way you're that bad right now. Things can't be that bad. You get a little frightened and shook up. Yeah, that's my only recollection.
Or sometimes you get those blasts of lightning that hit so close to you that all you can see is a bright flash of light for a split second.
Yeah, it blots out everything that you're viewing. Yeah.
That's scary stuff. The messages, when they come on, they're always broadcast with that computer voice, where they say, the National Weather Service issued a severe storm warning for, doesn't have any kind of intonation or inflection, and will say things like, a severe thunderstorm warning has been reported for the following counties. Stay away from windows and all doors. If you are outside, seek shelter. And it will say it in that very dead voice, and one of these days, I swear, it's going to say something like, an apocalypse warning has been issued for the world. Please stay away from windows due to the flaming hail and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. If you see the pale rider, do not approach. Stay indoors. Oh shit.
Things are bad.
Yeah.
It would be bad if you're working for like a pharmaceutical company. It's like all employees proceed to the bottom platform. This is an emergency. Self-destruct sequence has been activated.
Fortunately, I don't think the television warnings say a self-destruct sequence, but
Well, you never know. There could be a hijacking.
with a hijacking, though, there's something about the word intrusion that I feel is psychologically a sensitive word, so to say. Because a hijacking, when you think of hijacking, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I mean, now today we all know 9/11.
With a hijacking, we think of somebody taking over something. But when it's a hijacking, do you think of what's being taken over so much as yours or something like independent, so to say?
Definitely mine.
Intrusion, however, to me, that sounds even more personal.
Yeah, definitely. I think even like the word intrusion, the word was made because somebody had intruded on somebody else. It wasn't like a big, there wasn't a reason for it outside of two people having an encounter.
If I told you that somebody was trying to hijack your home, would that make any sense?
Good luck.
No, exactly. But if I
yeah.
said that somebody was intruding into your home,
Then I would be a little scared.
yeah, see, there's something about intrusion that I feel is psychologically a little scary because you have your own space and someone's intruding into it. That's why I feel like these broadcast service intrusions are unsettling. And we're going to see, because we're going to show you the footage of the Max Headroom incident. But before we show you the footage, Max Headroom itself was a figure that was developed in the 1980s as part of it was a marketing gimmick, part of it was a series, like an actual movie that was supposed to be called, I think it's like 20 Minutes into the Future, something about Max Headroom 20 Minutes in the Future, something like that. The character was played by a guy named Matt Frewer. He's got like this very square jaw, there's some prosthetics and makeup involved in it. It's basically, he's an artificial intelligence that's kind of shorting out a little bit, but he's basically comes from the idea that, as it's written here on Wikipedia, we'll refer to it, the background story provided for the Max Headroom character in his original appearance, which was the Max Headroom 20 Minutes into the Future cyberpunk film. It was a UK television movie. It was rooted in a dystopian near future dominated by television and large corporations. The AI of Max Headroom is shown to have been created from the memories of a journalist named Edison Carter. The character name of Max Headroom came from the last thing Carter saw during a vehicular accident that put him in a coma, a traffic warning sign that said on it, Max Headroom 2.3 meters, so a maximum clearance of 2.3 meters. And of course, being the UK, that's why I said meters. So it was suspended across a car park entrance, maximum headroom, Max Headroom, that's what he thought his name was, and he was used for advertisements. He was in a music video for Art of Noise for their song Paranoia, and he's appeared on a whole bunch of other stuff, including a short-lived television series. So this character was popular enough to where he was in the pop culture zeitgeist for years, and somebody decided to take a mask of him, and they put on this broadcast signal intrusion that we're going to show for you right now, so you know what it looks like, and then we'll discuss.
Way to learn.
I'll get you a hot drink, miss.
I've seen some dry clothes.
These are freaking nerds. Checks worse than Jesus.
So, that's the footage. Stefan, what were your thoughts when you first watched this?
So this is very incredibly odd, actually, because there's something interesting about the fact that, first off, they knew how to interfere with the broadcast. They shook the waves. People called in, obviously, because their show or the news was interrupted. I forget what was playing. It doesn't matter. But people were calling in and like, well, hey, was that meant to happen? Like, we know who Max Headroom is. What's going on? You know, are you advertising a beer? Was that pornography or something? You know, there was all these questions leading up and culminating into people just being curious about what happened. And it certainly didn't go away, you know, because this thing happened twice. They did it once and then they did it again. And I think that was kind of bold of them. Obviously, they're criminals, so I'm not going to say that power to the broadcast interrupters, intruders, invaders, hijackers, whatever. There's something interesting about the video and that what they're doing is so bizarre that I'm curious if they planned it, if they were on hallucinogens, if they were drunk, if they said, oh, well, this will be funny, and then it just culminated into this idea. Then they pressed the on button, they stole the network, and then they just had at it. I don't understand how this would come about unless somebody had to have been inebriated or was something, you know, like reading from some weird script that they came up with. Was there a hidden message? I don't know.
Well, the thing that's weird about it is that, as you mentioned, this happened twice. The first incidence of it was going on at the 9 o'clock p.m. news for WGN, which is at the time, it was primarily a Chicago affiliate, but WGN has become a station that broadcasts nationwide, just that popular that WGN can be picked up on cable networks across the country. This first incident happened for about 20 seconds or so during their 9 p.m. news broadcast. Around 2 hours later, during a broadcasting of Doctor Who on a different network on their PBS station, it happened again, and this one happened for 90 seconds. The thing that's unique about it is they were able to overpower the signal of two different networks. And whoever was working for WGN just knew how to shut it down. Like, they found out what was going on, then boom, they just shut it down. I guess one of the engineers who was working there must have, been able to figure it. According to Wikipedia, it says that the hijacking was stopped after engineers at WGN switched the broadcast band of their link to the transmitter, to a different transmitter. Somebody was able to somehow co-opt the transmitter for WGN, and fortunately an engineer was smart enough to know, okay, we've got to switch this over. As for the PBS one, according again to Wikipedia, WTTW, which is a PBS affiliate, had a transmitter on top of the Sears Tower, and its engineers were unable to stop the hijacker due to the fact that there were no engineers on duty at the Sears Tower at the time of the hijacking. Makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, according to station spokesman Andorid, the technicians were monitoring the transmission from their headquarters, attempting to take corrective measures, but they could not. By the time the people began looking into what was going on, it was over. The network, like you mentioned, they received a lot of phone calls from people wondering what the hell was going on. Because people were taping Doctor Who, they were able to see what actually happened in terms of what people were viewing. It's interesting to think about how they were able to do this to not just one station but two. They had to have had something to where not only did they have the equipment powerful enough to override those signals, but they would have had to know what those signals were, what broadcasting band they were broadcasting on.
Yeah, that actually brings up a point I wanted to make. I'm just curious about this, if maybe this is a possibility, because they said that nobody was up there to do anything about the broadcast. The place was empty, and that just doesn't ring true to me. That sounds like something that they would say to cover up the fact that either somebody had been fired beforehand, or somebody was sleeping on the job, or they called in sick and they had nobody to replace them or something. It just sounds like a corporation against the media. This is our excuse for why this happened, so we're not to blame for it, because obviously we're not. And we shouldn't be held responsible. There was just nobody there, and that doesn't ring true to me. For some reason, I just feel like maybe they were just saying that, as over the controversy. But because in the end, you do see guys bare ass. They don't want to be held responsible for that.
It could go either way with that. Could it be corporate cover-up to make themselves look less incompetent?
Mm-hmm.
It could. But at the same time, a lot of stations for their overnight will rely on automation, where the computer just broadcasts, whatever they have programmed in. And this did happen at 11 o'clock at night. So is it possible that they didn't have somebody there and they were just relying on automation? Yes, but at the same time, and this is the thing that I think sides towards your end of things, why did this video stop when it did? Because it doesn't seem like that was the end of the video.
No, it does not at all. And that's the other point I was going to bring up, is that even though if they were ballsy enough to do this, then why would they stop knowing that nobody's there, or, you know, that they're not going to be turned off for any reason? Obviously, it would take a little bit of time to track them. It's got to be something, a mix of the things there that explains why the video ends so abruptly, because stuff was still going on.
Right.
And the corporate statement and everything clashing together. Another thing I wanted to bring up too is that, so he hums a song in the video, and it's a song of a show. Was there a hidden reason behind that? And then he talks about something about the corporations and the soda and like all the things together. What did you take from that?
See, it's weird, some of these references. Now, mind you, this was happening in, I believe it was 1987. Yeah, late 1987, late November. So some of the things that he's saying here don't make a lot of sense. For example, one of the things that he was humming was the theme song to the show Clutch Cargo. It was an old animated show that was notable for its unique animation style of getting around the idea of having mouths move. Instead of animating them, they would just like superimpose a person's lips over the animated figure.
They actually used to do that with Marvel. Like they would draw characters at the Marvel bullpen, and then they would superimpose the characters on the screen and then just like slide them across, but they would be in the same pose the whole time and put somebody's mouth there. Same thing. Same thing happened with comic books, cartoons in the early days. Yep.
Yeah, so I don't think anything about Clutch Cargo would have been noteworthy for any kind of statement. Now, some of the other things were more applicable. For example, there's a Pepsi can where he says "catch the wave," which was a phrase that was being used at the time for soda, but I think it was actually a Coca-Cola phrase. Yeah, it was a Coke phrase, and he's holding up a Pepsi can. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's like some sort of meta message in that about all these companies are the same despite their slogans. There's also reference to one of the broadcasters on WGN, Chuck Swartzky, which makes sense with the fact that they first tried doing this on WGN. So it's possible that this was directly targeted at WGN. Maybe they didn't like the broadcasting station, and then when it failed, because it got switched over, maybe that's why they resorted to PBS.
That's a possibility. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, that's the first thing that comes to mind, because they're literally calling out a broadcaster, and they call him a frickin' liberal. But whatever. It's
that's the thing too. I just don't get the message, because like they're criminals first of all. First and foremost, they are criminals.
Yes.
And they've never been caught, so they got away with it. But here's the thing, whatever they say, even if it made sense, shouldn't be taken seriously.
I don't think anything was a direct threat or anything like that. I think they were just trying to target WGN to poke fun at them. Because one of the other things he says is he made a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds. And WGN stands for World's Greatest Newspaper. It was when it was originally founded back in the 1800s. That's what it stood for, and then obviously it became something else. It became a television station. So, again, it seems like that's what he was trying to do, was whoever did this was target WGN. And also, I think this is self-explanatory, but for those who might not know, this wasn't done live both times. This was something that was recorded. They obviously recorded this in advance, and then they overrode the station. So it wasn't like, okay, roll camera, we're going live. It was they've already recorded this, and then they were overriding the airwaves with it.
Again, it's so bizarre, just some of the things he's saying, because they knew what they were doing. Like, one of the things he says is, your love is fading. I don't know. It's just so bizarre. And the other thing is, you've seen already in the video, is the background shaking. Obviously meant to look like Max Headroom's show, mm-hmm. But just the whole, I guess, production of this hijacking, like, they actually put thought into it. So yes. They knew going into this that they could do it, is what I take from that, because they wouldn't have wasted time putting so much effort into it if they didn't know they could do it.
It borders on the obscene at that place, too, where at the end, this guy's getting his bare ass spanked with a fly swatter.
Brave lady, I will say.
Yes. So something was totally calculated about this in the fact, like you said, they had to have known they could do this. My theory would be somebody realized that they had the information to override the airwaves. They knew they could do it. So it's just a matter of what do we want to do. They take their pot shots at WGN in this video, put it together, and then they see if they could override the airwaves successfully. They found out that they could. And then it gets overridden. So, there goes their shot at trying to get the message out there and have their fun with this. So then it happens again at PBS. And they actually succeed in it. They know they're doing it. But what cut off the fact that they were able to override it? Because if PBS is right, saying, oh, there was nobody up there, then, again, does this video, honestly, is that where it ended? They were just going to put that out and that's it? That doesn't make any sense to me. I feel like there was more to this than what they were able to broadcast. Somebody finally was able to kick it off the air, and it cut out when it did.
Right, and if nobody's at these broadcast stations around a certain time at night, they could obviously just do it again. Which, of course, if they push their luck, which I don't see why they wouldn't, they could do it again. So I still don't believe that nobody was there, or there had to have been some way that, like, oh my God, somebody just showed like a giant phallic, like a penis on the TV. We got to shut down immediately. Press the red button. There has to be, even if it was the 80s, there had to have been a way. I just don't believe that part of it. But I will say that I'm glad we talked about this, because this is probably one of the most bizarre things I've ever had to have a conversation about.
Yeah, it marks something that people have talked about on the internet for years, and they've never been able to find the culprit. There's been some people who have theorized about it, but just get the fuck over it. You're never going to find out who did it unless they openly confess to it. I don't think that's going to happen. It's if it's been this long since it's happened and nobody's confessed to it, then the person who did it either has no intention of doing it or they're dead. Either or.
Yeah, which is again to say 1987. So like even if they were like, let's say 18, that was 32 years ago. So they would be well into their 50s now, and I highly doubt that they're going to come out for any reason just to go to prison.
But remember, too, that this was happening because the original attempt at this happened at 9 o'clock during the WGN news, and then the second incident happened at 11 o'clock at night, about 2 hours later. And I would suggest that, this happening at that hour, it's 11 o'clock, it's dark out, it's night. To me, it's a little creepy seeing this come into your airwaves in your home at that hour.
Yeah, and people, I'm sure at least over half the people viewing it had to have been like, whoa, what's going on? Like, this is creepy as shit, Like, nobody saw this and was like, oh, all right, Max Headroom's on. Cool, man. That's awesome. Hell yeah, Max Headroom, man. Give me another beer, Chuck. Yeah, one for Sally, too. No, pass the joint, man. No, none of that was happening. Maybe in one household that was happening, yes. But in all the other ones, no. So this had to have been bizarre to people, and I find it fascinating because I think it's interesting that, some people just, whatever reason, however they break the law, this might be one of the most interesting ways where it actually doesn't, as far as we know, harm anyone in any way. It's just meant to be a prank and a joke. It's almost like the Jackass of the 80s or something. So maybe a little bit more scandalous, maybe a little bit more, as you said, Webb, intrusive, but it's definitely a prank. You can tell it's a prank. I find it fascinating.
It would be an interesting way of doing some sort of like civil disobedience or protesting in a way like that. Like, for instance, that Captain Midnight one where he's protesting the means of HBO charging so much for access to the airwaves.
Well, it's almost straight out of a comic book almost. It's like the Joker hijacking the airwaves or, just anyone, just like the bad guy.
Yeah, it really is.
And we all know, the bad guys are never liberals. They just complain about it. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But yeah, that's, it is straight out of a comic book. So that Captain Midnight thing, I have to watch that too.
Yeah, it's It's basically just a test pattern. Like, we can even include an image of it, like, right here. Here, everybody, I'm throwing up an image for you of Captain Midnight. You can look at it live while we're talking. Yeah, look at that.
Come check out this image, Chuck.
That's a
Sally.
test pattern. Like, look at that. Are y'all impressed by the test pattern? Whoa, look at that.
Woo!
But anyway, broadcast signal intrusions, there's others online that are obvious fakes. Like, if you want to look up one that's a clear fake but is still creepy, look up, it's a long-standing one called the Wyoming Incident. And it's all been part of an ARG. I don't know if we'll ever cover it because it's been done to death with other channels have covered it. But look up the Wyoming Incident if you want to see something that is creepy. But you'll also notice how fake, compared to this broadcast signal intrusion, and then compare it to this, that one that you're going to see coming up with, if you decide to watch the Wyoming Incident, you'll see how fake the transition from the news footage of what they're showing to whatever it is that they're intruding on. And then not to mention the part that really makes it so fake is that when the intrusion's over, in this intrusion in quotation marks with the Wyoming Incident, it cuts back to exactly where the broadcast left off, which is obviously not how that works.
It's just like stop, play. Before we get out of here, because that's basically all you can say about this. It was bizarre. It was a prank. Good job in getting away with it, I guess. But before we leave, I just want to say 3 of my favorite Max Headroom quotes.
Yes.
I don't know if you have any. Do you have any, Webb?
I just have basically the lyrics to Paranoia.
Okay.
It's a good song, but you go with yours, because I don't want to... I'll just recommend people watch Paranoia.
Yeah, so Max Headroom, again, he was played by Matt, who, if you don't know who this guy is, he's been in Watchmen, he was in Dawn of the Dead, he plays Moloch. So, but one of my favorite Max Headroom quotes is, and when he talks too, he like, it looks like he's cutting out, like he's, how would you put it, Webb? Like he's malfunctioning?
Yes. Short-circuiting, basically.
Short-circuiting, and he'll be like, I love you, you know. One of the 3 favorite quotes is, love, the walks over soft grass, the smiles over candlelight, and the fights over just about everything else. And, you know, that's a funny one. Another, like, he'll say profound things, too, like, the loudest sound in the universe is the last heartbeat. Which is very, very depressing. And then there's another one he said, it's kind of a long one, but he said, you know, people can be really nasty. Only the other day I heard someone say, he's nothing but a robot, covered in makeup, talks a lot of nonsense. What a way to talk about the President of America.
Oh, Max.
Oh, Max. Before we leave, I just want to say Max Headroom was an interesting character, only in the fact that he was against corporate enterprises. I guess he survived as long as he did being against them, even though it doesn't make any sense why he would.
Yes, because he was being used for advertising for corporate interests.
Right. He's supposed to be the counterculture, yet he's part of it. So it's an interesting character, and if these hijackers had to pick anyone else, I'm actually glad they chose Max Headroom because that's who he is. So it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if they were legitimate fans of Max Headroom and they realized the irony of how the character was being used for corporate interests, so they actually took the character to its logical extent.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, that could easily be the case. And it goes down in history, though, as one of the more famous incidents of broadcast signal intrusion. And because it can be unsettling, it can be interesting like that, we'd like to hear your thoughts on it. How did you feel after watching it? Did you feel it was unnerving? Did you find it was just like some sort of hysterical kind of a prank? Would you, if you had the opportunity to, prosecute these people, let's say they found them, do you think they should be fined? Should they have been arrested? Or do you think this is just something that was a harmless prank? We'd like to hear your thoughts on it. And there's different ways you can reach out to us. There's the YouTube comment section. You can also find us at myself at Critical Android on Twitter, or you can email me at thecriticalandroid@gmail.com. And Stefan, JD, how can they find you?
I am on Instagram. You can find me under Cyberpunk Holiday, all one word, and come say hi.
we have more things coming up. If there's any real-life incidents like this that you'd like to see us talk about, I don't think we'll be going too much into, like, don't go too far into, like, true crime stuff. But if there's, like, any interesting, like, abnormalities that you know about that happen in the news, based off technology like this, or if it's just a really odd circumstance, let us know, because we'd be not only curious to find out about it, but also maybe do a little bit of investigating and talk about it on the show.
I do love the bizarre, and I know Webb does too, so yes, please do that.
Yeah, anything just fascinating. If you find something that it was riveting, and you feel like, wow, this would be an interesting point for discussion because it's so unique, then pass it on to us so we can unearth that tomb within the crypt.
Dun dun dun.
And speaking of the crypt, this is one thing that I do feel that people should unearth, open up that tomb, take a look inside, because it really is interesting.
I'm going to say yes too, only on the fact that I hadn't heard of it before, so it came as a real surprise. The year 1987, and this happened in November, so I was September, October, November. I was 4 months old.
Aw,
so
little baby Stefan JD.
I was like, wah, wah, Max Headroom.
Those were your first words as a child, were Max Headroom?
Yeah, and I was like, also, I'm wet. Change my ass. No, I'm sorry.
Your priorities as a child were very strange.
I was a weird child. But,
I'll be honest with you. Haven't changed an awful lot if that's the case.
Yeah, still a child. You're correct.
Yes. I hate you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
I hate you so much. Oh, gosh, thank you all for tuning in, for putting up with our dumb asses. But no, sincerely, thank you for listening. So for myself, the Critical Android, and Stefan JD, we will talk to you again soon. But for now, the crypt is closed.